The emergency beacon screamed through every speaker in the medical bay. David dropped the supply box he was organizing and ran to the communication panel. His hands moved fast across the controls, bringing up the distress signal. The voice that came through was breaking with panic. Medical emergency. Rookie compound. Child injured. Critical condition. Please respond. David grabbed his field kit and rushed out the door. The corridors of Talvos 4 research station were usually quiet, but now people were gathering in small groups, whispering nervously. The Rookie were private people. They never asked for help from outsiders. If they were calling now, something was very wrong. He reached the Rookie compound in less than 5 minutes. The door slid open before he could knock. A large figure stood in the entrance, easily 3 times his size. Cora, the expedition leader, looked down at him with eyes that showed both fear and distrust. Her fur was standing on end, her massive hands clenched into fists. "You are the human medic," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, I'm David. I'm here to help." Cora stepped aside but blocked his path slightly. "My son. Cave collapse during soil sampling. Internal injuries. Our doctor is off-world. 3 days away." David felt his stomach tighten. 3 days was a lifetime in emergency medicine. "Take me to him, now." They moved through the compound quickly. Other Rookie watched him pass with suspicious eyes. Humans and Rookie had worked together on this station for 2 years, but there was always distance between them. The Rookie kept to themselves, trusted their own ways, their own medicine. David had never treated a Rookie before. He had barely seen their medical files. The room they entered was dimmed. On a low platform lay a small Rookie, small only compared to adults. The cub was still larger than David, covered in soft gray fur that was matted with dust and blood. His breathing was shallow and fast. Too fast. David knelt beside the young one and opened his kit. "What's his name?" "Taro," Cora said softly. Her voice was different now. The hard edge was gone, replaced by something raw and painful. "Taro, I'm going to help you," David said, though he doubted the cub could hear him. He pulled out his scanner and ran it over the small body. The readings made no sense. Rookie biology was completely different from human biology. Their bones were denser, almost crystalline. Their organs were arranged in patterns he had never seen. Some organs appeared in sets of 3. "What do your readings show?" Cora asked, leaning close. "Internal bleeding. Severe trauma to the chest cavity, but I need to understand his biology better. Can you access his medical records?" Cora moved to a wall panel and brought up files on a screen. David studied them quickly, his mind racing. The Rookie had 3 hearts, not 1. Their blood carried oxygen differently. Their healing processes were unlike anything in the standard medical databases. The information was incomplete, contradictory in places, not enough to work with. "How long ago was the injury?" David asked. 4 hours. 4 hours of internal bleeding. David looked at the scanner again. Taro's vital signs were dropping. Without treatment, the cub would die within hours, maybe less. The door opened behind them. Dr. Oren entered, his tall, thin frame moving with stiff precision. The Peluvian administrator looked at the scene and his face showed immediate concern. "Dr. Chen, what are you doing?" "Responding to a medical emergency," David said without looking up from his patient. "You are not authorized to treat Rookie patients. Their biology is too different. You could cause more harm. Protocol requires we wait for a specialist." David stood and faced Oren directly. "The specialist is 3 days away. Taro has hours, maybe less, then you will stabilize him. Nothing more. Do you understand? Stabilize only." Cora stepped forward, her size making even Oren step back. "My son is dying. Will your protocol save him?" Oren looked uncomfortable. "The protocol is designed to protect patients from incorrect treatment. Cross-species medicine is extremely dangerous without proper training and knowledge." "I understand the risks," David said. "But doing nothing is also a choice. And that choice will kill Taro. You will stabilize only," Oren repeated firmly. "I will file a report with medical oversight. Any treatment beyond basic stabilization will result in disciplinary action." He turned and left the room. David looked back at Taro. The cub's breathing was getting worse. His fur was losing color, turning pale. Stabilization would not be enough. He could see that clearly in the readings. The internal bleeding was too severe. Without surgery, without direct intervention, Taro would die. Cora knelt beside her son, one massive hand touching his face gently. "Can you save him?" David wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise this mother that everything would be fine, but he had been a medic long enough to know better than to make promises he might not keep. I don't know, he said honestly. I've never treated a rookie before. I don't know enough about his biology. I could make things worse, but you will try? David looked at the cub, at the mother, at his scanner showing vital signs that kept dropping. He thought about protocol, about rules, about safety measures designed to prevent mistakes. He thought about the 3 days it would take for the specialist to arrive. He thought about what those 3 days would mean for Taro. Yes, he said. I'll try, Cora nodded slowly. In rookie culture, allowing an outsider to touch their young was deeply significant. It broke ancient taboos. It showed trust that went against every instinct. She was offering him that trust now out of desperation, out of love for her child. There is something you must know, Cora said. In our culture, if an outsider harms a cub, even accidentally, even with good intentions, the penalty is severe. I understand. No, Cora said, her eyes meeting his. I do not think you do. But I give you permission anyway. Save my son, David Chen. Or die trying. David nodded. He turned back to Taro and began setting up his equipment. His mind was already working through possibilities, options, plans. He had field experience from Earth's colony worlds, had improvised in difficult situations before. But nothing like this. Nothing where the biology was so foreign, so unknown. He looked at his scanner one more time. Taro's vital signs dropped another point. The real work was about to begin. David's hands moved across the scanner controls, adjusting frequencies and trying different settings. Standard medical equipment was designed for common species biology. Humans, Peluvians, Draxi, even the insect-like chitter could be scanned with normal tools. But rookie tissue was too dense. The scanner couldn't penetrate deep enough to see what was happening inside Taro's body. This isn't working, David muttered. He sat back and thought hard. If standard medical tools couldn't see through rookie tissue, what could? What equipment on this station was designed to scan through dense material? The answer hit him suddenly. Mining equipment. The geology lab. I need to leave for a few minutes, David told Cora. I need different tools. How long? 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Cora looked at her son. Taro's breathing was getting more difficult. Each breath seemed to take more effort than the last. Hurry! David ran through the corridors again. The geology lab was on the lower level, near the sample storage rooms. He burst through the door and startled 2 researchers who were examining rock samples. I need a deep scan probe, David said quickly. The kind you use for mineral detection. The older researcher, a human woman named Patricia, frowned. Those are for rocks, not people. I know. But I need one anyway. Medical emergency. Rookie cub. My equipment can't penetrate their tissue density. Patricia and her partner exchanged looks. Then she moved to a storage cabinet and pulled out a handheld device that looked like a medical scanner, but was much bulkier. This one can scan through solid rock up to 3 meters thick. But the settings are all wrong for medical work. Can you recalibrate it? Maybe. What do you need to see? Internal organs. Blood flow. Damaged tissue. Patricia worked fast, her fingers moving through the device's menu system. I'm setting it to detect liquid density variations and structural irregularities. That should show you what you need. But David, this thing wasn't designed for living tissue. I can't promise the readings will be accurate. It's better than what I have now. Thank you. He grabbed the device and ran back to the rookie compound. Cora hadn't moved from her position beside Taro. The cub's fur was definitely paler now, his breathing even more labored. David powered up the mining scanner and ran it over Taro's chest. The display filled with data. Complex structures appeared in layers, showing the intricate arrangement of rookie internal biology. 3 hearts pumped in synchronized rhythm, but one was weak. A large organ that didn't match anything in human anatomy was bleeding heavily into the surrounding cavity. There, David said, pointing at the display. That's the problem. This organ here is ruptured. It's bleeding into his chest. Cora looked at the image. The central lymphatic organ. It processes nutrients and removes waste. If it fails completely, the body cannot survive. David pulled up his medical database and searched for any information on rookie lymphatic systems. There was almost nothing. A few basic diagrams, some notes from previous research. No surgical procedures, no treatment protocols, nothing useful. Has this injury happened before to other rookie? David asked. Yes, in combat, in accidents. Our doctors have procedures. But I do not know them. I am not a medic. David studied the scan carefully. The organ was roughly the size of a human heart, positioned between two of the three Rookie hearts. Blood vessels connected it to all major body systems. The rupture was on the lower side, and blood was pooling in the chest cavity, putting pressure on the hearts. He needed to stop the bleeding and repair the organ, but surgery on an unknown organ with unknown properties was incredibly dangerous. One wrong cut, one incorrect decision, and he could kill Taro in minutes. The door opened. Dr. Oren entered again, this time with two security officers behind him. Dr. Chen, you are exceeding your authority. I have been informed that you requisitioned mining equipment from the geology lab. You are clearly planning to perform unauthorized procedures. David didn't look away from his patient. I'm planning to save his life. You are planning to violate every medical safety protocol we have. This station has rules for good reasons. If you proceed, I will have you removed from this room and confined to quarters. Cora stood up slowly. Her full size was impressive, towering over everyone in the room. This is Rookie territory. You have no authority here. The station's medical regulations apply to all sections, Oren insisted, but his voice was less certain now. My son, my choice. The human stays. Oren looked at the security officers, but they seemed reluctant to get involved. Interfering in Rookie territory was complicated. The station's political structure gave each species group autonomy in their own compounds. If this goes wrong, Oren said to David, if the cub dies or is harmed by your actions, you will face criminal charges. Medical malpractice at minimum. Possibly worse under Rookie law. I understand. No, I do not think you do. The Galactic Medical Council will revoke your license. You will never practice medicine again. Your career will be over. David finally looked up at Oren. And if I do nothing? If I follow protocol and wait 3 days for the specialist? What happens to Taro? Oren said nothing. That's what I thought, David said. He turned back to his patient. Oren stood there for a long moment, then turned and left. The security officers followed him. The door closed. Cora sat down again beside her son. You risk much for a child who is not your own, not even your species. That's what doctors do, David said simply. He pulled out more equipment from his kit. Standard surgical tools, sealant compounds, synthetic blood vessels. Everything seemed inadequate for the task ahead. Rookie tissue was too dense for normal scalpels. Their blood chemistry was too different for standard medications. David thought about the mining equipment he had just borrowed. If a mining scanner could see through rock, could mining tools work on Rookie tissue? The geology lab had precision laser cutters designed to slice rock samples. With careful calibration, could they work as surgical instruments? I need to go back to the geology lab one more time, David said. You keep leaving, Cora said, her voice strained. I know. I'm sorry. But I need proper tools for this. 10 minutes, he ran again. Patricia was still in the lab, and this time she had already guessed what he needed. I pulled our precision cutters, she said, gesturing to 3 devices on the workbench. The small one can make cuts accurate to 0.5 millimeter. I've set the power as low as possible while still being effective on dense material. You're a lifesaver. Just don't let Oren know I helped. I like my job. David took the cutters and hurried back. This time, when he entered the Rookie compound, several other Rookie had gathered outside the medical room. They watched him pass with unreadable expressions. Word was spreading through the station about what was happening. Inside the room, Taro's condition had worsened noticeably. His breathing was very shallow now. The scanner showed his vital signs approaching critical levels. No more delays, Cora said. Do it now. Whatever you must do, do it now. David laid out all his equipment. A mining scanner for seeing inside the body, laser cutters designed for rock samples, standard medical supplies that might or might not work on Rookie biology. It was the strangest surgical setup he had ever assembled. He took a deep breath and looked at Taro. The young Rookie had not moved or made a sound in over an hour. His body was shutting down. David picked up the laser cutter. His hand was steady. Years of training and field experience had taught him to stay calm under pressure. I'm starting the procedure, he said. Cora placed one large hand on her son's arm. Save him. David positioned the cutter and began. The first cut was the hardest. David held the laser cutter steady and made a precise incision through Taro's dense skin and muscle tissue. The tool worked perfectly, cutting through material that would have stopped a normal scalpel. Thin wisps of smoke rose from the cutting point, and David adjusted the extraction fans to clear the air. Blood appeared in the incision, but it looked wrong. Instead of flowing freely like human blood, it seemed thick and sluggish. David used a suction device to clear the area and got his first look at rookie internal anatomy in person rather than on a scanner. Everything was different. The tissue layers were arranged in ways he had never seen. The blood vessels had unusual branching patterns. Even the color was wrong, a deep purple instead of red. David felt a moment of doubt. How could he repair an organ when everything about the body was foreign to him? He pushed the doubt away and focused on the task. The scanner showed him where to go. He needed to reach the damaged lymphatic organ and stop the bleeding. The surgery took on a rhythm. Cut carefully. Check the scanner. Clear the blood. Cut again. Each layer of tissue revealed new surprises, new challenges. David adapted constantly, adjusting his technique based on what he found. How is he? Cora asked. She had not moved from her position beside Taro. Her eyes never left her son's face, when unstable for now. I'm making progress. Outside the room, David could hear voices. More people had gathered. Not just Rookie, but others from the station. News was spreading. A human was attempting the impossible, trying to save a Rookie life with mining tools and improvisation. David reached the chest cavity after an hour of careful cutting. Blood had pooled here just as the scanner had shown. He used suction to clear it away and got his first clear view of the damaged organ. The central lymphatic organ was a complex structure, roughly spherical, covered in small nodules and surrounded by blood vessels. The rupture was a tear about 5 centimeters long on the lower surface. Blood was leaking steadily from the tear. David needed to seal that tear, but normal medical sealants would not work. Rookie tissue was too different. He needed something else. Then he remembered something from the medical database. Rookie blood did not clot the way human blood did. Under certain conditions, it crystallized. The notes had been unclear about what caused this crystallization, but David had an idea. Cora, does Rookie blood crystallize when it gets cold? Yes, very cold. That is how wounds close naturally in our bodies. The blood forms crystals that seal damaged areas. David looked at his equipment. He did not have medical-grade cooling tools, but he had something else. In his field kit was a canister of cryospray, normally used to preserve tissue samples. If he could cool the damaged area rapidly, maybe he could trigger the blood to crystallize and seal the tear. I'm going to try something, David said. It might not work. If you do nothing, he dies anyway, Cora replied. David positioned the cryospray and carefully applied short bursts around the tear in the lymphatic organ. The blood immediately began to change, becoming thick and forming crystal structures. It was working. He applied more spray, watching carefully as the crystals spread across the damaged area. The tear was sealing itself, the crystallized blood acting like natural stitches. Within minutes, the bleeding had stopped, but David was not finished. The organ was sealed, but it was damaged. He needed to make sure it would continue to function properly. Using the scanner, he checked the blood flow through the organ. Several vessels were blocked by crystal formations. This was delicate work. David used the smallest laser cutter on the lowest power setting to carefully remove excess crystal buildup. Too much and he would reopen the wound. Too little and the organ would not function properly. Hours passed. David lost track of time, focused completely on the task in front of him. His back ached from leaning over. His hands were tired, but he kept working with steady precision. You should rest, Cora said at one point. Almost done. The station's general announcement system crackled to life. All personnel are reminded that medical procedures must follow established protocols. Any violations will be investigated fully. It was Oren's voice. David ignored it and kept working. Finally, after what felt like forever, the organ was repaired. Blood flow was restored. The scanner showed normal function returning. David began the process of closing the surgical site, working backward through all the tissue layers he had cut through. This was easier than the initial cutting had been. Now he understood Rookie anatomy better. He could see how the layers fit together, how the blood vessels connected, how the muscle tissue was arranged. He worked faster, sealing each layer carefully. When he finished the last external stitch, David sat back and looked at his work. The incision was closed. The scanner showed stable vital signs. Taro was still unconscious, still weak, but he was alive. Is it done? Cora asked. The surgery is complete. Now we wait and see how his body responds. David cleaned his tools and started monitoring equipment. Taro needed constant observation for the next several hours. Any complications would show up quickly. The door opened. Several Rookie entered, including some of the community elders David had seen around the station but never spoken to. They looked at Taro, then at David, then at Cora. "You allowed an outsider to cut into your cub," one elder said. The disapproval in his voice was clear. "I allowed a doctor to save my son's life," Cora replied firmly. The elder examined the scanner display, reading Taro's vital signs. His expression changed from disapproval to surprise. "The readings are stable. Better than stable. How is this possible?" "Human improvisation," David said simply. More people arrived over the next hour. The small medical room became crowded. Rookie stood shoulder to shoulder with humans, Peluvians, Draxi, and others. Everyone wanted to see the result of the impossible surgery. Patricia from the geology lab pushed through the crowd and gave David a water bottle. "Thought you might need this. You've been in here for 8 hours. 8 hours." David had not realized so much time had passed. He drank the water gratefully. Dr. Oren appeared at the door but did not enter. He looked at Taro, at the equipment, at David. His face was difficult to read. "If the cub survives the next 48 hours, Oren said, "we will discuss what happened here. Until then, you will continue monitoring him." It was not approval, but it was not condemnation either. David nodded. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Cora remained beside her son. David set up a chair and prepared for a long night of monitoring. Every few minutes, he checked Taro's vital signs, looking for any sign of complications. Around midnight station time, something changed. Taro's breathing pattern shifted. His eyes moved beneath closed lids. His fingers twitched slightly. "He's waking up," David said. Cora leaned close. "Taro, can you hear me?" The young rookie's eyes opened slowly. He looked confused, disoriented, in pain, but he was alive and conscious. "Mother?" His voice was barely a whisper. Cora made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She gently touched her son's face with one massive hand. David checked the scanner again. All readings were in acceptable ranges. The surgery had worked. Against all odds, despite the lack of knowledge and proper tools, despite the warnings and protocols, it had worked. Taro would survive the night. The real question now was whether he would survive the days and weeks ahead. Recovery from such trauma would be long and difficult. There were still many ways things could go wrong. But for now, in this moment, David allowed himself to feel something he had not felt since the emergency call first came in. Hope. 3 days had passed since the surgery. Taro was recovering steadily, his vital signs improving each day. David had barely left the medical room, catching sleep in short periods while monitors watched over his patient. Other station members had brought him meals, and Patricia had even set up a more comfortable chair for his long vigil. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. David woke from a brief rest to the sound of alarm tones from the medical monitors. He jumped up and checked the displays. Taro's body temperature was rising rapidly. In the past 10 minutes, it had climbed to dangerous levels and was still increasing. "Cora," David called out. She had stepped away to her quarters to rest for the first time since the surgery. Cora returned within seconds, as if she had been waiting just outside. She looked at her son and her expression showed immediate concern. Taro was shaking slightly, his fur damp with perspiration. "Fever," David said, already reaching for medication. "Severe fever. His body temperature is critical high and still rising." He pulled out a dose of broad-spectrum fever reducer from his kit. The medication worked on most known species by affecting core temperature regulation. David prepared an injection and moved toward Taro. Cora's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The grip was not painful but was absolutely firm. "No, stop. What? He needs medication now. If his temperature keeps rising, it could cause brain damage or death." "No medication," Cora said firmly. "Not for fever." "Cora, I don't think you understand. This is serious. His temperature is already at levels that would kill most species." "I understand perfectly. You do not. Put the medication away." David looked at her in confusion and growing alarm. Taro's temperature climbed another degree on the monitor. "Cora, please. Let me help him. You are trying to help. But that medication will kill him. Rookie cubs do not reduce fever. They burn through it. What does that mean?" Cora moved to her son and placed a hand on his forehead. "After major trauma or surgery, young Rookie develop very high fevers. This is normal. Required. The fever burns away damaged cells and triggers deep healing processes. If you stop the fever with medication, you stop the healing. The cub will die. David felt his blood run cold. He had been seconds away from giving Taro medication that would have killed him. His hand holding the injection was shaking now. How high will the fever go? Very high. Higher than you have seen in other species. To you, it will look like he is dying, but this is how our children heal. David put the medication away with careful movements. He had nearly made a fatal mistake through ignorance. The realization hit him hard. All his improvisation, all his creative problem-solving had saved Taro from the initial injury. But now his lack of knowledge about rookie biology had almost undone everything. What should I do? He asked quietly. Monitor him.
Keep him cool externally with water.
Make sure he drinks. But let the fever run its course. It may last 5 days, maybe more. 5 days of watching a patient burn with fever and being unable to treat it directly. Every instinct David had was screaming at him to intervene, to give medication to reduce the dangerous temperature. But Cora was right. This was rookie biology, not human biology. What looked like a medical crisis was actually a normal healing process. David set up cooling pads around Taro and prepared fluids for hydration. The young rookie was conscious but barely aware of his surroundings. His eyes were unfocused, his breathing rapid and shallow. I'm sorry, David said to Cora. I almost killed him. But you did not. You asked first. You listened. That is wisdom. Over the next hours, Taro's temperature reached levels that would have been immediately fatal to a human. David watched the monitors with growing anxiety, fighting the urge to intervene. He had to trust Cora's knowledge, trust that rookie biology worked differently than what he knew. News of the fever crisis spread through the station. People gathered outside the rookie compound again, waiting for updates. Dr. Oren came to check on the situation and was visibly relieved when David explained what was happening. You nearly administered contraindicated medication, Oren said. You see now why protocols exist? Why we should have waited for a rookie specialist. Yes, David admitted. I see that. But the specialist still has not arrived. If we had waited, Taro would have died from his injuries before the fever ever became an issue. Oren had no response to that. He left quietly. Patricia visited later that day, bringing food that David did not feel like eating. How are you holding up? She asked. I almost killed him. I was so focused on saving him with the surgery that I forgot how much I don't know about his biology. But you didn't kill him. You stopped and asked. That's the difference between a good doctor and a bad one. David appreciated her words, but they did not ease his guilt. He returned to his vigil beside Taro. The fever continued for days. David slept in short stretches, always staying within reach of the monitors. He cooled Taro's body externally as Cora had instructed, and made sure the young rookie received fluids regularly. It was the hardest kind of medical care, watching and waiting while being unable to take direct action. On the 5th day, other station members began taking shifts to help. A Draxi nurse named Vorna volunteered to monitor Taro so David could shower and change clothes. A human engineer named Robert set up a better ventilation system in the room to keep the air fresh. Even some of the other rookie began helping, bringing traditional cooling herbs and special water that they said would help. The station was coming together in support of one small patient. Species barriers that had seemed solid were becoming less important. Everyone wanted Taro to survive. On the 6th day, Taro's temperature finally began to drop. It was a slow decline, but steady. David watched the monitors with cautious optimism. The fever was breaking. By the 7th day, Taro's temperature had returned to normal ranges for rookie biology. The young patient was weak and exhausted, but alert. He could speak in short sentences and recognize people around him. Hungry, Taro whispered to his mother. Cora laughed, and it was a sound of pure relief and joy. He wants food. That is a very good sign. She prepared a traditional rookie meal of nutrient paste and mineral supplements. Taro ate slowly but steadily. David checked the scanner and saw that the internal healing had progressed remarkably well. The lymphatic organ was functioning normally. The surgical site showed no signs of infection or complications. You did it, Patricia said when she came to visit that evening. Against all odds, with tools that were never meant for surgery, with almost no knowledge of the biology you were working with, you saved his life. I almost ended it too, David reminded her. Almost doesn't count. You asked the right question at the right time. You were humble enough to admit you didn't know everything. That's not weakness. That's strength. David looked at Taro, who was now playing with a small toy his mother had given him. The young rookie was tired and still recovering, but he was alive and healing. Despite all the mistakes David had almost made, despite the gaps in his knowledge, despite the improvised tools and procedures, the outcome had been successful. Dr. Oren arrived with unexpected news. The rookie medical specialist has finally arrived. Dr. Silth is in the docking bay now. She'll be here within the hour. David felt a mix of emotions. Relief that an expert was finally available. Anxiety about what she would think of his improvised surgery. Fear that she would find mistakes he had made. When Dr. Silth entered the medical room, David was surprised by her reaction. She spent a long time examining Taro, reviewing all the medical data, studying the scanner images of the surgery. Her expression was unreadable. Finally, she turned to David. I am told you used mining equipment to perform this surgery. Yes. Standard medical tools could not penetrate rookie tissue density. And you had no training in rookie anatomy or surgical procedures? None. I improvised based on basic medical principles and adaptation. Dr. Silth looked at the scanner images again. This should not have worked. The techniques you used are not in any medical database. Some of the decisions you made contradict established rookie medical practices, but somehow it worked. The organ repair is excellent. Better than excellent. I had help, David said, gesturing to the various tools and equipment around the room. You had desperation and creativity, Dr. Silth corrected, and apparently that was enough. Dr. Silth spent the next 2 days reviewing every detail of Taro's surgery and recovery. She filled notebook after notebook with observations, measurements, and analysis. David watched her work with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. What would the expert verdict be on his improvised procedures? On the third day, Dr. Silth called a meeting in the station's main conference room. David arrived to find it packed with medical personnel from every species group on Talvos 4. Dr. Oren sat at the front, his expression neutral. Cora was there too, standing at the back with several other rookie. Thank you all for coming, Dr. Silth began. I have completed my review of the emergency surgery performed on young Taro. My findings are significant. David felt his stomach tighten. This was it, the moment when his improvised methods would be judged by professional standards. What Dr. Chen did should have been impossible, Dr. Silth continued. He used tools never designed for medical purposes. He operated on anatomy he had never studied. He made decisions based on incomplete information and pure intuition. By every standard protocol we have, this surgery should have failed catastrophically. The room was completely silent. But it did not fail, Dr. Silth said, her voice changing. Instead, it succeeded brilliantly. And more importantly, the techniques David developed in desperation may revolutionize how we approach emergency medicine in frontier situations. Murmurs spread through the room. David blinked in surprise. Dr. Silth brought up images on the main display. Look at this cooling technique used to crystallize rookie blood. It is not in our medical databases because we use specialized equipment that is expensive and requires training. But David achieved the same result with a simple cryospray that costs almost nothing and requires no special training. This technique could be taught to medics across the galaxy. She switched to another image. Here, the use of industrial laser cutters calibrated for surgical precision. Again, not traditional, but highly effective. In frontier stations where proper surgical tools may not be available, this improvisation could save countless lives. The presentation continued. Each technique David had invented out of necessity was analyzed and found to have broader applications. The mining scanner could help diagnose injuries in species with unusual tissue density. The cooling method could work in field conditions where traditional equipment was unavailable. Even the way David had adapted his surgical approach by learning as he worked showed promise for training programs. I am recommending, Dr. Silth concluded, that these techniques be formally documented and added to emergency medical protocols. Furthermore, I propose that Dr. Chen and I collaborate to develop training materials for cross-species emergency medicine. The room erupted in discussion. Some medical personnel were excited by the possibilities. Others looked skeptical. Dr. Oren raised his hand for silence. These methods violate established protocols, Oren said carefully. While I am pleased that young Taro survived, I must ask whether we should be encouraging medical personnel to improvise rather than follow proven procedures. Dr. Silth nodded. A fair question. But consider this. Frontier stations like Talvos 4 often face situations where proven procedures are not available or not applicable. We need medical personnel who can adapt, who can think creatively while maintaining safety. Protocol is important, but it should not become a barrier to saving lives. Cora stepped forward. My son is alive because a human medic was willing to try when everyone else said to wait. Wait for proper tools. Wait for proper training. Wait for the specialist. If we had waited, Taro would be dead. I am grateful for David's courage and creativity. The room fell silent again. There was something powerful about a mother's testimony, especially from a rookie speaking about allowing an outsider to touch her child. Over the following weeks, word of Taro's rescue spread beyond Talvos 4. Other stations began requesting information about David's techniques. Medical journals wanted to publish case studies. The Galactic Medical Council, which had been preparing to investigate David for protocol violations, suddenly found themselves defending their rigid standards against a wave of frontier doctors demanding more flexibility. David found himself in an unexpected position. Medical personnel from different species began approaching him with questions, not just about emergency procedures, but about cross-species medicine in general. How do you diagnose a patient when their biology is completely unfamiliar? How do you make decisions with incomplete information? How do you balance caution with the need to act? A Draxi surgeon named Vorna asked David to consult on a difficult case involving a Peluvian patient with unusual anatomy. Together, they developed an approach that combined Vorna's surgical skill with David's adaptive thinking. The surgery was successful, and the patient recovered fully. A human nurse named Lisa wanted to learn David's scanning techniques for dense tissue. They spent several days in the geology lab, experimenting with different equipment and calibration settings. Lisa eventually developed a portable version that could be carried in a standard medical kit. Even some rookie medics showed interest. They had always been reluctant to share their medical knowledge with outsiders, but David's success with Taro had opened doors. Dr. Silth arranged for David to attend a rookie medical conference, the first non-rookie ever invited to such an event. You are becoming famous, Patricia told him one evening in the station's common area. I heard someone on Earth wants to make a documentary about frontier medicine using your case as the central story. David shook his head. I just did what needed to be done. Anyone would have done the same. That's not true, and you know it. Most people would have followed Oren's orders and waited for the specialist. You took a risk because you saw it was necessary. That's courage. The biggest change was in how different species on the station interacted with each other. Before Taro's injury, each group had kept mostly to themselves. Humans with humans, rookie with rookie, and so on. But the surgery had brought people together in a shared crisis. That cooperation had not ended when the crisis passed. Mixed species work groups became more common. The station's social areas saw more integration. Even the rookie, who had been the most isolated group, began participating in station-wide activities. Taro himself became a symbol of this change. As he recovered and grew stronger, he became curious about the station and the different species living there. Cora would bring him to the common areas, and he would ask endless questions about humans, Peluvians, Draxi, and others. His innocent curiosity broke down barriers that had existed for years. One day, about 2 months after the surgery, a special ceremony was held in the rookie compound. David was invited to attend. He entered to find the space filled with rookie from across the station, and even some who had traveled from other locations. Cora stood at the center with Taro beside her. The young rookie was healthy now, his fur full and glossy, his movements energetic. He looked nothing like the dying cub David had first seen. David Chen, Cora said formally, you saved my son's life when our own people could not reach us in time. You risked your career, your freedom, and even your own safety under our laws. You showed courage and skill that went beyond your training. For this, we honor you. She produced a small carved stone, intricate and beautiful. This is a bonding stone. In rookie culture, it signifies family. By accepting this, you become part of our family line. You will always be welcome in rookie spaces. Your name will be remembered in our history. David took the stone, feeling its weight. I don't know what to say. Say you will continue to help others as you helped my son. Say you will teach your methods to those who wish to learn. Say you will remember that compassion is more important than protocol. I will, David promised. Taro stepped forward and handed David another gift. It was a small drawing the young rookie had made, showing David working with his strange equipment to save a patient. The art was simple but heartfelt. Thank you for fixing me, Taro said shyly. David knelt down to be at eye level with the young rookie. You're very welcome, Taro. You were very brave through everything. Will you teach me about medicine? When I grow up, I want to help people like you do. David smiled. I would be honored to teach you. The ceremony continued with traditional rookie music and food. For the first time since arriving at Talvos 4, David felt truly welcomed by the rookie community. The barriers of species and culture had not disappeared entirely, but they had become less important than the bonds formed through shared experience and mutual respect. 6 months had changed everything. David stood in the training center that had been hastily constructed in one of the station's unused cargo bays. 20 medical personnel from 8 different species sat in front of him, eager to learn the adaptive emergency medicine techniques that had saved Taro's life. The most important lesson, David said, gesturing to the various improvised tools on display, is that equipment is just equipment. What matters is understanding the principles behind what you're trying to achieve. If you understand why a scanner needs to penetrate tissue, you can find other tools that accomplish the same goal. A young Peluvian medic raised her hand. But how do we know when it's safe to improvise? How do we know we're not making things worse? You never know for certain, David admitted. That's the hard truth about frontier medicine. But you make the best decision you can with the information available. You weigh the risk of action against the risk of inaction, and you stay humble enough to admit when you don't know something. Dr. Silth stepped forward to add her perspective. In traditional medical training, we emphasize protocols and procedures. This is important. But Dr. Chen has shown us that rigid adherence to protocol can be its own kind of failure. We must teach both. Follow procedures when they work, but be prepared to adapt when they do not. The training program had become David's primary responsibility. He still treated patients, but more and more of his time was spent teaching others. Medical personnel from across the frontier were requesting spots in his courses. The waiting list had grown to over 300 names. Not everyone was happy about this development. The Galactic Medical Council had initially opposed the new training methods, calling them dangerous and unprofessional. They had launched an investigation into David's treatment of Taro, looking for violations and mistakes they could use to discredit his approach. The investigation had not gone the way the council expected. When Dr. Silth presented her detailed analysis of the surgery, when Cora testified about the choice she had made and why, when dozens of other medical professionals spoke about how David's techniques had helped them save lives in their own emergencies, the council found itself defending an increasingly unpopular position. Frontier doctors were frustrated with regulations written for well-equipped hospitals on core worlds. These rules often did not apply to stations where resources were limited, and exotic species with unusual biology needed care. The council's rigid stance began to look less like protecting patients and more like protecting bureaucracy. The turning point came when a major medical emergency struck a mining colony on the edge of known space. An industrial accident injured 30 workers from 4 different species. The colony's small medical staff was overwhelmed and lacked proper equipment for several of the injured species. A human doctor named Robert, who had trained with David 3 months earlier, used adapted techniques to improvise solutions. Mining scanners became diagnostic tools. Industrial cutters became surgical instruments. Common chemicals became specialized medications. 28 of the 30 injured workers survived, including several who should have died according to standard triage protocols. The story made headlines across the frontier. Medical professionals pointed to it as proof that adaptive medicine worked. The Galactic Medical Council found itself under pressure to reform its standards. David watched these developments with mixed feelings. He was pleased that his techniques were helping others, but uncomfortable with the attention. He had not set out to revolutionize frontier medicine. He had just tried to save one patient in an impossible situation. Taro had become a permanent fixture around David's training sessions. The young rookie was determined to become a doctor, and he spent every free moment learning from David and Dr. Silth. His unique perspective as both a patient and a student made him valuable in demonstrations about cross-species empathy and Communication. Tell them about the fever, Taro said during one session. Tell them how you almost gave me the wrong medicine. David smiled at the young rookie's enthusiasm. That's an important lesson about hubris. I had successfully performed an impossible surgery, and I started thinking I knew what I was doing. When the fever started, I immediately reached for medication without stopping to think about whether rookie biology might be different. It was almost a fatal mistake, but you stopped and asked, Taro said. That's what makes you a good doctor. You listen. The training session continued with practical exercises. Medical personnel worked with unfamiliar equipment, trying to adapt tools from other disciplines for medical purposes. It was messy and often frustrating, but that was the point. In real emergencies, nothing would be perfect or easy. During a break, Dr. Oren approached David. The Peluvian administrator had been quiet about the training program, neither supporting nor opposing it openly. I owe you an apology, Oren said formally. When you chose to operate on Taro against my direct orders, I believed you were being reckless and endangering a patient. I was wrong. You were following protocols designed to protect patients, David replied. I don't blame you for that, but the protocols were insufficient for the situation. I have been thinking about this a great deal over these past months. Rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. I forgot that essential truth. I let procedure become more important than purpose. What changed your mind? Oren smiled slightly. Watching you teach. You do not tell your students to ignore protocols. You teach them to understand why protocols exist, so they know when following them makes sense and when adapting them is necessary. That is wisdom I lacked. Later that day, a message arrived from the Galactic Medical Council. After 6 months of review and debate, they had made their decision. David read it with Dr. Silth looking over his shoulder. They are creating a new certification, Dr. Silth said, reading ahead. Frontier Emergency Medicine Specialist. They want you to help design the curriculum. David scrolled through the document. The council was not abandoning their standards, but they were acknowledging that frontier medicine needed different approaches. The new certification would teach adaptive techniques alongside traditional procedures. It would emphasize creative problem-solving while maintaining safety principles. They want to offer the first certification course here, on Talvos 4, David said. They are asking us to train the first group of specialists. Will you do it? David thought about Taro, about all the students he had already trained, about the doctors across the frontier who were adapting his techniques to save lives. He thought about the mining colony where Robert had used improvised methods to save 28 people. Yes, he said, but we do it right. We teach them to think, not just to follow new procedures. We teach them humility and creativity in equal measure. Over the following months, the first official Frontier Emergency Medicine course began. 50 medical professionals from 20 different species attended. They learned not just David's specific techniques, but the thinking behind them, how to assess unfamiliar situations, how to adapt available resources, how to balance risk and reward, how to know when to act and when to wait. Taro, though still too young for formal medical training, became an assistant instructor. His enthusiasm was infectious, and his unique perspective as someone who had been saved by adaptive medicine gave him credibility with the students. The course gained recognition quickly. Graduates found themselves in high demand at frontier stations, colonies, and exploration vessels, places where rigid protocols were less helpful than creative thinking and adaptability. 1 year after Taro's surgery, a ceremony was held at Talvos 4 to celebrate the graduation of the third class of Frontier Emergency Medicine Specialists. Representatives from the Galactic Medical Council attended, formally acknowledging the program's success. David stood at the front of the room, looking at the graduates. They represented dozens of species and came from stations across known space. Each had learned not just techniques, but a way of thinking about medicine that valued both knowledge and creativity. When I operated on Taro, David said, I had no idea it would lead to all of this. I was just trying to save one patient with the tools I had available, but that is what frontier medicine is really about, seeing what is in front of you, understanding what is needed, and finding a way to bridge that gap. He gestured to Taro, who stood at the side with Cora. The young rookie had grown significantly in the past year, and his determination to become a doctor had only strengthened. Our job as medical professionals is not to follow rules blindly, but to serve life. Sometimes that means following established procedures. Sometimes it means writing new ones. What matters is making the choice that gives our patients the best chance to survive and thrive. After the ceremony, David walked through the station with Patricia. They passed through common areas where different species mingled freely, through labs where mixed species teams collaborated on research, through medical facilities where doctors trained in adaptive techniques treated patients of all kinds. "You changed this place," Patricia said. Before Taro's injury, people kept to themselves. Species groups stayed separate. Now look at it. Real integration, real cooperation. "One emergency does not transform a society," David replied. "No, but it can start the process. You showed everyone here that barriers can be crossed when it matters, that trust between species is possible, that different approaches to problems can be valuable." Those lessons spread. They reached the viewing port that looked out at the forest moon below. Talvos 4 was beautiful, with its blue-green forests and silver rivers. It had been David's home for 3 years now, and he had no plans to leave. Taro ran up to them, excited about something. "David, Dr. Silth says in 2 more years I can start basic medical training. Real training, not just assisting. Will you still be here to teach me?" David knelt down to the young rookie's level. "I will be here, I promise." "Good, because I want to learn everything you know. I want to help people like you helped me. I want to be the kind of doctor who does not give up, even when things seem impossible." David smiled. "Then that is exactly what you will become." As Taro ran off to share his excitement with his mother, Patricia asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Taking that risk with Taro? It could have ended your career. It could have ended worse." "No," David said without hesitation. "I made the best choice I could with the information I had. The outcome was uncertain, but the choice was clear. That is all any doctor can do." They stood at the viewing port, watching the moon turn slowly below them. Somewhere in the station, students were learning adaptive medicine. Somewhere else, doctors were treating patients using techniques that had not existed a year ago. And somewhere, a young rookie was dreaming of the day he would become a doctor himself. David had not set out to change frontier medicine. He had just tried to save one life when everyone else said it was impossible. But sometimes one life, saved against all expectations, can ripple outward in ways no one could predict. The human medic had defied all expectations, and in doing so he had shown the galaxy a new path forward.